woke up this morning, turned on the news. Spokesman was a-talking about the do-da-like-a blues going around all over town. The doctors and the nurses, they don't know what to do, 'cause it's not like a cold, not like a flu. It's a different set of symptoms called the do-da-like-a blues. Music, for me, has always been undeniable. Music is a force that seemed to reach out and take hold of me rather than me taking hold of it. From the earliest days of going to church, I used to stand up on the pew between Mom and Dad when I was 3 or 4 years old and just be singing out boldly. And I can remember people turning around and looking, you know. And I think it was just they were amazed that this little bitty kid, 4 years old, was singing out with so much enthusiasm. So music for me has always been incredibly powerful. And when I look at all the various things I've done in my life, you know, I'm a minister. I was pastor of a church for several years. I've been a social worker. I'm producing a radio show nowadays. I worked for the state. I've worked for the county. I've done all kinds of jobs, but there's one thing that's a through line for my whole life, and that's music. Music is at the beginning, and it'll be with me till the very last day I'm on this earth. The greatest thing to me is to have someone come up to me and say, "Wow, that song you wrote, I've been listening to it. I listen to it a lot, and it really touches something in me." I mean, that's worth $1 million to me. That's what it's about. I'm a guitarist primarily. I dabble at piano and banjo and mandolin, but on stage I'm using a guitar as my main instrument and sing. I'm a singer, folk singer. My musical style is pretty much folk music, you know. I grew up in Oklahoma City, about 50 miles from where Woody Guthrie was born. Tom Paxton, the great American folk singer, was in Norman, Oklahoma, which is about 30 miles from where I grew up. Came up with Texas swing and gospel music, country music. I listened to country radio from the time I can remember anything. Listening to Del Rio, Texas on a little bitty Philco radio in the living room with Mom and Dad late at night. So I'd say my style is shaped by gospel music, folk music, country music, and rock. Mama said from the very earliest time, before I can certainly remember anything, that I would stand up in my crib and dance to Bob Wills when he came on the radio. And so one day, Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys were playing at a little bitty movie theater, like a matinee. And they were all there. They had a stage there, and Mom took me down. It was the Criterion Theater in Oklahoma City, and this was 1950. And Mom took me down to see Bob Wills. And I kind of broke away from Mom and ran down to the front of the stage, just completely carried away with the music. And Bob Wills picked me up and put me on stage with him. And I remember that. That's about the only thing I remember from my 5th year of life. But that's an indelible memory. And to this day, Texas swing, the music of Bob Wills, immediately evokes absolute joy and rapture from me. I just feel so happy to hear that music. And gospel music, by the same token, it has such a compelling force in my life. It's really defined me. It's everything to me. I spent 3 years in the Baptist seminary here, and I still spend a lot of time in theological reflection and reading. And really, I would say art, and specifically music, is at the very center of my own theological perspective. It's the primary way that I have come to understand a little bit more about God, to know about God, and to express my own faith. And when I say that, I'm not necessarily talking about doing gospel songs or even songs that necessarily have any overt reference to a theological concept or to God or anything. It's that those songs contain the values and the spirit that I think is really what's important in theological thought and in religion. Music was a career choice to me early on, 35 years ago. But because of poverty, you know, and also when I was on the road, I had 2 kids at home at that time. I would be lonely. It was great when you were on stage, but I would be lonely during the day and thinking about the kids. And so finally one day I just quit. And I didn't even really play for a while. I sang in the Unitarian Church choir, and they paid me a little bit. But then I gradually began really developing a career as a solo performer. But that career was always subordinate. I worked for the school district for about 10 years, and that job represented security. It was a regular check. I had health benefits, something that a lot of musicians don't have. So I put music as a career on the back burner. And then in 1995, I had a rather substantial heart attack. I was out in the woods, and I made it. Obviously, I'm here, and that's been a while back. So while I was recovering from the heart attack, I was on leave from my job with the school system here, and I did a lot of introspection. I did a whole review of my existence and what my priorities were. And if you have a near-death experience, it has a way of clearing away debris from your life. Whatever you might have thought was important suddenly becomes not so important. And things that you put on the back burner, you suddenly see are the real things that you need to be addressing. And that's what I began to think about music. What I realized is the one thing I care about the most is the one thing I have relegated in my life. So when they called, I had my heart attack on the 4th of July, and they called me about end of September and said, "When are you thinking about coming back to work?" You know? And I said, "Well, I think you just need to find somebody else for that job." And it wasn't because I was angry with anybody. I loved the people I worked with. But I realized you need to be getting on with what your bliss is, with what it feels like your purpose on earth is. So I made that commitment then, and actually the heart attack in some ways was a blessing because it helped me. I went on disability for a couple of years, started building up a music enterprise, and finally called in and said, "Okay, take me off disability. I'm getting back into the workforce, this time as a performing artist." And speaking of music as a career and coming back to it again at this point in my life, I have made another conclusion, and it's partly based on what's happening in music today, you know, in terms of music industry. The big labels, the record labels, are reporting, you know, 8 to 10% drop in sales for the last few years. So you can easily, and it's the impact of technology. You know, the internet has just blown it wide open. And I don't think the record labels have really figured out quite how to deal with that yet. They've obviously got some ideas, but it's hard to sell records when people are downloading them for free. So we have to come up with a new paradigm. The big labels have to do it, but guess what? John Gage, as a small independent artist, needs to reassess, reevaluate, and find a new way to pursue music as a career. So the new direction for my career is I'm not seeking a label. I'm trying to find ways of marketing and distribution to get my music to the people that want to hear it. And I'm banking on there being a few thousand folks that would want to buy this record. I'm going to find them myself, connect up with them, and more or less sort of taking the music to the people. I have to say, you know, we have a lot of support, including financial support in Louisville. I think it could just come up a little. And you know what that would do? I think there are many unknown, unfulfilled, undeveloped artists out there who saw right away that taking the course of music was going to lead them into a life of poverty, a vow of poverty. And they don't want that. So I think we could improve that a little bit. You know, and it might encourage more people to become artists. We might even be richer culturally if we really made a commitment to sustaining and supporting the arts.